But it's my pleasure to welcome you all here tonight. I am Michelle Garrio, and I'm one of the Adult Services librarians. And I'm so grateful overall for the URI Master Gardeners and everything that they have provided for us. Not only amazing speakers, but they also maintain some of the garden plots that you see right here around the library, including the pollinator garden that's out front and the vegetable garden, which is starting to grow over on the side, and the amazing free seeds that we have available in the library. So if you're looking to get started with something, maybe try something new, you might be able to find those materials right here in the library for free to you, courtesy of the Master Gardener program. So I thank you all for coming tonight for this amazingly, what do we want to say, on target program. I don't know if you can get more relevant than talking about drought when right here in Seekonk this weekend, we unfortunately had a brush fire. So it is something that we are all dealing with in one way or another. We know that throughout the summers, at some point, you will probably get a notice that there is a water restriction. And so I'm so grateful for everybody who's here now, and you're thinking ahead like gardeners do. What can I do? How can I be ready? And I want to thank our patrons who actually suggested this topic, and for the URI Master Gardeners for finding Alan, who was very happy to actually help put this program together for the first time. So you're the inaugural group to hear this amazing information. As we typically do, we do have some flyers in the back telling you about our upcoming programs. I have extremely fresh off the press the May program flyer as well. And so for my gardeners, I think you might be interested in a program in about a month from now, on Wednesday, May 24th, also at 6 p.m. And it's called Goodbye Lawn. So if you feel like, enough with the lawn, let me just focus on my garden plots. Goodbye Lawn Sustainable Alternatives. So if anybody's had any thoughts of maybe reducing what they have to deal with in their lawn, then you want to come back for that. But of course, there's other amazing programs. If you are a nature lover, then this is the time to take out your cameras and enjoy some of those beautiful open spaces we have in Seekonk. We are hosting the 4th annual Seekonk Nature Photography Program. And there's a very brief window of May 1st to May 15th for you to submit your photos as not so much a contest, but an opportunity to help digitally preserve some of these beautiful open spaces that we have, because we never know what will happen in the future. So we want to be able to have those and share those and celebrate those while we can. You will be getting a feedback form for everybody who's registered, so that you'll have a chance to give us feedback, not only for the library, but also for the Master Gardeners. Anything you can tell us about other types of programs that you would like to see, or even different times that you would like to be able to, you are available to come to programs here. So our speaker for tonight is from the URI Master Gardeners. He is Mr. Alan Newton. He is actually has a background as an educator. So I think you'll find him very easy to talk to and approach with questions, and he'll have a great presentation for you tonight. He volunteers with the Master Gardeners with their hotline, which many of you know you can call and you can ask your garden questions, and you'll have a trained Master Gardener answering those questions. And he also volunteers with the CCAP project in Cranston. So he can tell you about that garden project if you have questions for that as well. All that being said, I think I can turn it over to you, Alan. Right. Thank you so much.
Good evening. Good to see you all here and to be presenting tonight. As you can see, I'm class of 2020, which affectionately is known in Master Gardeners as the COVID year. We started having to be, our classes were live. You know, we would go down to URI every once a week, and in the evening for a program. And then in March, they shut us down because of COVID. And so we had to go online. And now actually what that taught the Master Gardener program is that they can reach far many more people by going online. So all the classes now are done online. So you could be a part of the Master Gardener program if you wanted to be, and be able to zoom in into those classes every week. Okay. We are part of the cooperative extension at the university. It was established in 1914, and every state has a Master Gardener program through a cooperative extension, which is usually a part of a land grant university, which URI is one of those. And the areas of our concentration are land stewardship, food systems and agricultural, water resources, energy efficiency and conservation, and renewables, and healthy lifestyles. And if you go on our website and click on any one of those, you'll find resources that you would be able to use. And these are all the different programs, the ways that we are operating as master gardeners. We have demonstration gardens, one's here. We have school gardens. We do free soil pH testing. So if you want your soil tested for pH, you can find any of the places that we do all around the state of Rhode Island and even here in Seekonk. And if you want nutrient testing, then you can mail it to University of Massachusetts and University of Connecticut, and they do a full analysis. And we recommend you do that about every 3 years, just especially if you're doing vegetable gardening, just to find out what's going on. We have the hotline as we mentioned, which is 10 to 2 all through the year. Soil testing is just a March through October, and that's done at URI. You can mail it in. You can mail soil samples into us, or but the hotline is there. We answer during the winter remotely, and there's an answer machine to pick up your messages, and be glad to provide that support to you. You can become a master gardener, as I said. Every year we do a training program, and the registration starts around July 1st, and then you have until November to submit an application. And usually there's more applications than they can accept in a class, which is a good thing to have. But if you apply multiple years, the second year you usually have a to get involved in the program. It's a 14-week program. And, I think this year we have a largest class, which is like 155 people in the class. We'd like to do a land acknowledgement to recognize that we were not the first ones here. In this area, it was the ancestral homelands of the Wampanoag, Pokanoket people of the morning light. I love that name. And they welcomed the English to share their land. They had no concept of buying or selling land. So even though the English thought they were you're buying land, that wasn't a concept, that it was a foreign concept to the natives that were here. But we give thanks for the stewardship of the land that we found it to be rich in resources in both land and sea, and we honor their descendants today. And may our program, this program today, create in us the same reverence for place and help us to become better stewards and caring for the land. So the outline for the conversation today, first, it's going to be the downside. I put it in red. We're going to talk about the changes we are seeing. And some of those things are things that you are seeing. Some of the things are things that we're getting lots of calls on the hotline, and that tells us what's going on in the area. And a lot of those are because of drought and as a result of climate change. And the second part, we'll talk about the strategies for how we might compensate for some of these changes. I think the first step is always important just to be aware of it. This is from the Providence Journal last year. Rhode Island, and this would be Seekonk area as well, has the highest rate of warming in New England since the beginning of the 20th century. And you can just give you a moment to read through that. I won't read through all of it, but New England is getting hotter than the rest of the country. And so the droughts that we've been experiencing are getting longer, and it's getting hotter. And the heat, along with the high humidity, is part of what the problem is that we're seeing happening. And it's not like we haven't been warned. These are some of the folks who have been warning us for centuries. Von Humboldt, very early on in 1799, visited Venezuela and saw that they were taking apart the deforestation there to produce indigo farming. Eunice Foote who is in 1856. She's the first one to recognize that there was rising gases increasing the CO2. And just kind of goes on. Each one of these folks throughout the centuries have made contributions and telling us what's going on in our environment and giving us warnings and saying, like, wake up, folks, we need to pay attention. Of course, we have some activists, Gore and Thunberg, especially with the youth movement now. Ptolemy, I have a number of his books here. He's works in the University of Delaware, and he's an environmentalist, and he has written a number of these books that kind of talk about what's going on and how we can do things to turn things around. So big changes are to come. And this is just a sample of some of the things that we are going to face, and I'll go through these line by line. So we can expect pest insects, which were once limited by geography, will emerge in greater numbers. Greater numbers of invasive plants are displacing our native species. Suitable habitat for tree species will change, and it's shifting more and more towards the north. So trees that were not able to grow here because they are in the south and wanted warmer climates than ours are able to plant in our area. And a lot of the trees that we have are not going to be able to be sustained in our area any longer. Loss of native plants will result in loss of native insects and birds. Interesting thing that I was finding out is just one nest of chickadees. To raise those, they need 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars during that one brood. And plant diseases will become more common. So let's talk first about the insects that are moving in. The upper corner there is the tobacco budworm. Used to be only in the south, and now it's coming up here. Doesn't eat a lot of the plants, the vegetable plants, but it eats a lot of our flowers. In the upper right is these beech leaf disease that we're seeing as a cause of these microscopic nematodes. It's really wiping out all our beech trees. This whole forest of beech trees down in Richmond, Rhode Island that are gone now. Mm-hmm. And I'm seeing around, I live in East Greenwich, and some of those big stately beech trees, they're dying off. They're almost all affected. We have the stink bugs, brown marmorated stink bugs, and they're eating our fruit crops. The Colorado potato beetle used to be more out west, and now it's coming this way. We have the Asian jumping worms down in the bottom down there. And you'll know that we have like 3 or 4 species here in Rhode Island. And I'll show you in a moment a picture of what's happening in our forest because of that. And then the spotted lanternfly is a fairly new one in our coming into Rhode Island. And it's been in Massachusetts the last couple of years. And it's a kind of misnomer because it's not a flying insect, it's a jumping one. But it's affecting a lot of our fruit crops, and especially they go after the grapevines.
I have a question about stink bugs, because we never had problems. We've been in Seacon for about 20 years, and I don't know about other people, but we just started noticing them within the past year, and they're getting into the house somehow. Mm-hmm. And we're not sure how
they get in. Prevent them. Tiny places they'll get in, And how do
you repel them? What's the best thing? Is there a natural repellent?
There's really not a natural repellent. I mean, we don't get them in large numbers in our house. I just take them outside or squish them and put them or flush them down the toilet or something, but I mean, it's,
yeah, that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, there is one variety, which is a good bug, which is a little bit different. It has like pointy shoulders, and that's a native one, and that's a predatory bug. So it's a good bug. So make sure that if you're killing them, that you're killing the ones that don't have that spike coming out on the shoulders. But that's another foreign invasion. There's three different kind of stink bugs that have come into the area. There's green and there's brown marmorated, and I can't remember the other one, but there's only one native one that we have. So this is how you tell that there's Japanese, these Asian jumping worms. And you'll notice that you'll pick them up and they'll squirm all over the place. Common earthworm, the European earthworm that we have, just kind of lays there. This one will wiggle all around, try to get out of your hand and to get away. But this is what happens, is that the upper picture is a normal forest understory. And down below is what happens when we got invasion of these invasive worms. It just kind of depletes all that native area. And what happens then, that space that's there does get filled in, but it's getting filled in by invasive plants. Not a good thing. Our native pollinators do not go to those native plants, most of those native plants, and so it creates a problem. The way you can tell is that that little band there, the collectium, that is all around that worm, and they usually have more of a point on the end. You know, here in this area, we don't have any, in New England, we didn't have any native earthworms there, and because of the glaciarization, they killed it all of our worms. So the worms we have are from other places, although we are seeing some of the native worms starting to come up in this area from the south. So these are some of the invasive species that we're seeing. That lanternfly that I was just talking about loves the tree of heaven. And it's important to kind of get out your plant identification books and try to decipher between the sumac and black walnuts and tree of heaven. Tree of heaven is an invasive plant, and it's not helpful for our environment in any way. We have the barberry, the Japanese barberry in the middle there. And I'm seeing that all around the woods in my area that have just come up. Privet hedges is another one that spreads and becomes invasive. The cattleberry pear is beautiful. You'll see it blooming all over now. It was brought in initially because they thought, and it was, in its own species, it's sterile, so it wouldn't have reproduced. But they learned by their mistakes, and they found that it was cross-pollinating with other pear trees, and so it spread. And this is an example of it just kind of taking over a forest, replacing our native species. Down in the corner here on the bottom left is the mile-a-minute vine. Good example, we'll see that if you go out to Block Island, it's taking over. It's like kudzu, it's just like picking over the plants and kills all the plants that it invades with vining. And then we have the Oriental bittersweet, which a lot of people love, but there is native bittersweet, but the Oriental one, which is what we have in most greater predominance in the area, is not a helpful one. Porcelain berry is a beautiful berry. It's part of the grape family. But again, it's an invasive that is taking over. And then Japanese knotweed, which we're seeing in great numbers all around. It's a hard thing to eradicate because it spreads by rhizome underneath the roots. And the best thing to do is to just keep on mowing it down, and that eventually will kill it off. It's like they call it false bamboo too, because it has like kind of bamboo structure. Bamboo is another invasive that we have in the area, and a lot of people are calling because their bamboo was dying because of the cold snap we had early this year. Climate change projections for individual trees, and this will be on a recording, so you'll be able to see it. But if you go to the forestadaptation.org, you'll see a list of the trees that have poor capability in terms of surviving the climate change that we're going to be having. And then good capability. You can see the ones that are there. A lot of them are the ones that we see all around us. And so that's a good thing. And this has happened before, so that we have great confidence that even though, like I mentioned the beech forest that died in Richmond, something else will come and replace it, and then we'll have still a vibrant forest, but the difficulty is still there. One of the concerns was in the paper the other day about our forest land is that they're taking a lot of the forest and putting up solar farms. And so it's one thing to help with energy, with dealing with the climate change, but it's affecting another thing. You lose your trees, you lose something that produces more oxygen and takes in the CO2. One of the things that I keep on telling people, people will call in and they'll say, well, I want to plant a Colorado blue spruce. Well, the name itself should tell you, Colorado blue spruce. It grows well in Colorado, and it is borderline for our temperate area. But as it gets warmer here, if we move from 6B to 7 in terms of the climate zone, it's not going to do well here. Alberta spruce, you know, that's another native alpine tree, and it has grown in our area, but we're seeing a lot of disease in those people are sending us these heart-wrenching pictures of the beautiful Alberta spruce that is dying away. Because we are losing a lot of native species, we're also losing a lot of our native pollinators. And it's a real problem. You know, if you figure you have, if someone gives you $10 and then immediately takes away $4 and says that's your kind of the tax, we're losing 40% of our insects nationwide. And for some of the ones that's even higher, the leafcutter bees, we have more native bees than we do. Of course, there's only one honeybee, which is imported, which comes from Europe. And one of the sheets that I have over here on the table for you is one that talks about keystone native plants. And it talks about how many pollinators are using or depending on certain plants. And one of those, like the oak, the white oak, 436 pollinators that depend on our oaks. So the oaks are very important to us. Loss of bird species, and you'll see here a chart of the changes that have happened in terms of loss of and decline of certain bird species. The waterfowl, they're growing, you know. The raptors are growing, but some of the others are in decline. And part of the problem is that our plants are blooming earlier than bird migration. It used to be, not so long ago, that when the magnolias were blooming, the hummingbirds were showing up. Well, now the magnolia has already stopped blooming. It's dropped all its flowers, and the hummingbirds haven't arrived yet. And our migratory birds depend on having food at the source where they end up, because they're depleted from having traversed so far. And it's a real problem for them when some of our plants that they depend on have already gone through the bloom period. So you'll see here, this was something that came out of a study at Walden's Pond that they showed the decline or how early some of the plants were blooming now. It used to be, we would say our growing zone here, we would be able to plant our gardens. The last frost of the year, they said would be around May 15th. Now it's April 29th. So it's good things you can plant your gardens early if you started your seeds earlier. But the bad thing is that everything is kind of speeding up. We have more blights and other fungal diseases, and this is probably one of the things that we get the most calls at the hotline on. And unfortunately, what happens is that people have planted an entire row of, like, the arborvitae or entire row of boxwoods. And if one of those boxwoods gets the disease, guess what? It spreads to the entire one. So we're seeing people who have this beautiful landscape with all these arborvitaes, and they're losing every single one of them.
So in terms of like that, there's no solution?
There is a solution. When you see it first starting on one thing, you cut it out and then you spray with a fungicide. So we'll be spending a lot more on fungicides in the future. Like a copper fungicide is an organic fungicide that you can use. So how do you know if your plants are suffering from drought? So first, you'll see it in the wilting and yellowing and dropping of leaves. Leaves will curl up and they look scorched. They look like they've been sunburned. Someone brought in Pachysandra the other day that had fungus on it, fall tumus blight, and so, you know, we suggested she just cut out what's there and then spray the rest with the fungicide. Eventually plants will begin to show signs of decline as the tips and branches become dry and brown. And then new growth will be stunted. And when damage is severe, no amount of water will undo it. Natural defenses of the plants lessen, increasing the susceptibility of disease, infections, and insect invasions. So a healthy plant is the best guard against pest, insects, and also disease. The funguses that will happen. And so that's where soil testing is important to see what nutrients are there. We did a soil test in the garden at CCAP, which is a Cranston, it's like a community action program. It's a comprehensive program helping, and we grow all our vegetables, and we brought 1,800 pounds last year to the food pantry next door to help folks. It's a great project. And one of the things that we noticed that some of our plants weren't producing very well. And so I said, well, let's figure out what's going on. We did a soil test, and the potassium is extremely low, which means the plants can't take in water and nutrients. So we were seeing plenty of water. The soil was very moist, but the plants were still suffering. It looked like they were wilting. Well, it was because the potassium was so low. So doing that nutrient soil test is a good, is good advice. This is something that people worry about is in their lawns during drought. And this is the advice of the scientists that have looked at this, that it's best to let them go dormant. Overwatering weakens the grass. Actually, it produces shallow roots. So those people that have those sprinklers that are going on every day, it's really making their lawns very weak and very vulnerable. If you water, it's 1 inch per week, so you don't need to water every day. And then water between sunrise and 8 a.m. There's a lot of people I've seen in my neighborhood are watering late at night. That's a sure way of making sure you're going to have fungus problems, because you don't want wet plants at night. And if you're watering your vegetable gardens, you water, of course, at the bottom. You don't need to water the leaves. You know, that's not going to help anything. Let the grass grow higher. The higher the grass, the deeper the roots. Don't apply fertilizer or herbicides just before we hit in the summer, because that's not going to help them. It's going to make some rapid growth of the upper grass, the leaves of the upper grass, and the roots won't be able to support it. So that's not a good strategy. And then improve the soil structure by adding compost and limit traffic if you can during a drought. You know, you don't want the soil to get real compacted during that time. So those are strategies, you know. So that means that you have more water in times when they say you can't water, you know, but I think the thing is our cool season grasses do better if they go dormant. So if you see your grass yellowing and neighbors say, oh, your grass is really yellow, say it's a healthier lawn than yours is. And I can prove it in mine. My lawn came back this year, came back in the fall, and this year much healthier than it's ever been. It's very lush, very green, very thick. And that's what you want.
You have your lawn treated with fertilizer or?
Nope, I have clover and that adds the nitrogen.
What do you do about the grubs? Do you have any of that?
I don't have any grubs that are a problem. But the greater the density of your lawn, the fewer problems you're going to have with both grubs and also with weeds.
What about the Scott programs where they have it's 4 steps and they tell you to do it at certain times? Is that not good science?
I would only do it if the nutrient test that you take says that it should be done.
Or test the soil and see if you need it.
Yep. And the way you test the soil is you to go around and you go down 6 inches in a couple different places in your yard, combine that together and send them about a cup of soil for the testing. And that'll give an average
So
of
cup total.
cup total. Yep.
Bad soil. Like when I lived, my neighbor told me that when they dig to build those houses, it was a lot of clay.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know where they add to. But anyway, so what would you do if the soil is poor? You put more soil on top, or how you treat the soil?
Yeah, I mean, if you do your soil test and send it in, they'll give you recommendations on what to do. You know, and they'll tell you if it needs. A lot of times it's just adding compost and mixing it in the first couple, like first 6 inches, kind of mixing it in. Or you can kind of spread it on top if it's an established lawn. So add some compost.
Are you going to talk about perhaps different types of grass if we're reseeding or something that are drought resistant, or they're better?
The fescues are better.
What?
Fescues are better.
Fescues are better.
Kentucky bluegrass is not as sustainable, but the fescue grasses, the thin fescues are
You know,
better.
places like California, they have more drought problems than we do. And I think there are communities where they're actually requiring that people transition away from grass
Mhm.
and do some kind of other
Yep.
ground cover. Do
Right.
you have any information on that?
We actually have a great video. The URI has a cooperative extension video series. And if you go on and look at the playlist that has agricultural and I think it's agricultural and sustainability, that one, there is one on alternatives to lawns. Yep.
And actually, that would complement the program I mentioned.
Right.
And we are having a program on May 24th, just about a month from now, called Goodbye Lawn.
Oh, true. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm slowly adding more and more gardens and less lawns. So one of the, for flower beds, native plants are going to be more drought sustaining. I gave you a link to the native plant guide, and there's another one also that's on the website where you can put in the conditions of your soil, what kind of sun you get, what kind of moisture it is, what kind of wildlife you want to avoid or want to attract, and another key is planting these keystone plants. Paying attention to the certain native pollinators that will only go to certain specific species, and find out what those are. And all the other pollinators will go to those species, those flowers as well, but there are certain species that depend on a certain kind of plant. We know, of course, about the monarchs and how they like the milkweed. But there's other plants, the tiger swallowtails, the pawpaw plant, that they need to have those, otherwise they won't survive. Remove invasives. I've been spending a lot of my time in my yard. I moved there in 2018, and it was filled with invasives all over the place. So they had a lot of multiflora roses that were growing all over the place. We had vines on everything, killing the trees, especially the the bittersweet 20-foot long roots that were growing in that place. I have a lot of the Japanese barberry that's coming from the woods, and also a lot of privet that are growing all over the place. Landscape for caterpillars. Realizing that most of the pollination, the majority of the pollination happens at night. It happens with moths at night. There's 14,000 different species of moths that are our pollinators in our area. 4,000 native bees of all different kinds. Not everyone in this immediate area, but that's in the United States. Cut your lawn in half, or just cut out a little section as you go, keep on going. Some people turn the entire front yard into a meadow. And another person I know took the entire front yard and turned it into a vegetable garden. Neighbors some of them weren't happy, some of them were excited, but that's the way it is. Minimize the insecticide use. A lot of people use those zappers, thinking that kills the mosquitoes. 98% of the bugs that are killed are not mosquitoes. So we're losing a lot of native pollinators, and a lot of native good bugs. Reduce the light pollution. Those lights that stay on all night, are not good for native pollinators. And again, I talked about the National Wildlife Federation's keystone plants. Keystone plants are really important. Planting a diverse screening hedgerow. When everyone's talking about putting in a hedgerow, instead of doing something like the one here, the White House, where it has the row of barberry, plant something very diverse. It's much more attractive, much more appealing, and you're not going to be as susceptible to a disease that comes. It'll hit one. A lot of these diseases are specific to the species, so that there'll be a certain kind of bug or pest or fungus that'll hit a rhododendron, but won't hit anything else, or it may hit the what I was saying before, the low bush, no, not the privet, it'll come to me. It's right out front here, and there's some disease in the one that's out front here too. But we're going to see a lot more problems. The scientists are still working on all the different things that are coming. They're finding some things now that can help our hemlocks with that woolly aphid that is attacking them and killing them. They're finding some things that will happen, but it takes a long while. They found that there's certain things you can do to a beech to make it healthier, but they haven't found anything that will kill the nematodes that infect the leaves yet. And they figure that it's either the squirrels or the jays, the blue jays, and other birds that are flying and feasting on the buds is where that's being spread. So it's really hard to control. But you put polyphosphate 30 is a fertilizer, and that strengthens the tree by adding this extra dose of fertilizer. They say to add it twice, about 6 weeks apart in June and August. And they're finding the Ohio extension that's doing work on that is finding some success with that. So we have the native plant guide where it has the drop down. There's also the Rhode Island coastal native plant guide. You can just search for that by typing in Rhode Island, and that's where it'll talk about all the native plants that we have that you could plant. We say look for alternatives, like people love butterfly bushes, but that's not a plant that's native, and it's also invasive. But you can plant butterfly weed, which is that bright orange colored flower, beautiful flower, and that's really great for the butterflies.
Yeah, excuse me. Speaking about butterflies, I don't see as many butterflies around as I did 20, 30 years ago. Are they disappearing too?
They're in decline.
And what's causing that?
The habitat disruption, environmental concerns, along the way, the migration, we may have lots of milkweed here, but they have to have the different stops for the different generations all along the way from Mexico. Yeah. And usually it's the fourth generation that gets up here, and then fifth goes up to Canada. So it's just making sure that there's something that's blooming. And I would say, for a lot of the pollinators that we want, and for the birds as well, we need to have plants that are blooming all during the year. So you want a garden that is blooming from March until October. So you want to look for plants that will create that cycle. So there's always something there. Goldenrod is a beautiful flower, blooms at the same time as the purple asters, and the combination is just striking. That you can plant those two together, and you'll have a beautiful garden and something for the fall pollinators.
I just have a question about butterflies. So there are places in Massachusetts that we've had problems with diseases that are carried by mosquitoes, and so the town, I'm not even sure who does it, the state.
They spray.
Spray.
Mhm.
Does that kill the things like butterflies?
Kills a lot of them, yeah.
Pollinators and stuff.
Kills a lot of them. I used to spray my yard for mosquitoes, and I'm not doing it anymore. Because I always asked, I was using an organic one, and I kept on asking, is this safe for pollinators? And they said yes. And I did more research. My hotline hat on, and I just did more research, and it's not safe. So instead I'm going to replace it by using mosquito dunks. You just put in water, and that'll take care of the mosquitoes.
I knew what you said.
It's a dunk. It's called a dunk.
Dunk.
It's like a round little disc you put in water, and it kind of gets like in a bucket of water, and it's really specific to mosquitoes and it'll take care of it. And I also put a bat,
If the birds drink it, they won't get hurt.
right. And usually if you put it in a place where if you have some place for birds to go to, like a bird bath or something like that, you know, don't want to put it in that, but you put it in a bucket, you know, in a certain place, you know, where you might see
And you get
mosquitoes.
that like at Home Depot?
Mhm. Amazon, Home Depot, bat house. I just put up a bat house. So I'm hoping but a bat house has to be like 20 feet in the air. So it's a challenge, but
I found a good organic formula for mosquitoes. And used to sit in the back patio. And we used to have a farm at Sunset, right?
mhm.
And I looked up something and it said, if you can mix it in a canister, as we call it. Epsom salts, stale beer, and blue mouthwash. And I tried it and it works.
Mhm.
Never had a problem for like 2 or 3 months.
What are you spraying on, the plants? Or
I
yourself?
spray it around on the patio and,
Uh-huh.
you know, it keeps them away. I don't spray it on the plants.
Okay. I think it's best is just to put something on your body and it keeps them from bugging you. And
Yeah, it's good to try it.
thanks, that's helpful. So vegetable gardening during drought. Start planting when the ground is 55 degrees, which is pretty close to now. Like I said, it used to be about estimated around 15th of May. Now it's around May 1st for our growing season here, the zone. Choose drought resistant varieties, and the seed catalogs will tell you that. And heirloom varieties from the Mediterranean require less water, as does asparagus and chard and eggplant and mustard greens and peppers and Roma tomatoes. So if you like those things, then plant lots of those things. They're much more water efficient. 3 to 4 inches of mulch reduces the water intake by about 50%. And you could invest if you wanted to, if you had the capability of putting a drip system or a soaker hose. You can put it on a timer so it waters early in the morning. Those are some strategies that you might try if you haven't tried.
Sorry, we keep asking questions.
No, that's
As far
good.
as mulch, what kind of mulch is good for like a vegetable garden?
You can use all sorts of things. You can use
kind of
grass
wood.
clippings. You can use um,
What about wood chips? Like
wood chips. You could use wood chips or just use regular,
Does that affect the acidity of the ground? If you put these chips on top?
I don't think it would do that. No. I would say, you can use just like plastic mulch too. The black plastic mulch
Right.
goes from season to season. It's also good to rotate your crops if you can. It's hard to do in small gardens, but you may want to just if you're growing a lot of the nightshades, the tomatoes, the eggplants and peppers, you may want to choose another crop to plant the next year, like something else you like, and then take a year off and then plant them again. Provide an average water as plants get established and increase the water as they start to flower. So the watering time increases as they start to flower. Add organic matter to the soil, and control weeds as they compete with the moisture and nutrients and sunlight. And you can limit your garden size to exactly what you need. Don't plant more unless you want to give it away to all your neighbors, and they depend on you for vegetables. You could have, for your flowers, you could have a water barrel. Put it in by your downspout. They don't recommend you do that for your roof because it's dropping other stuff on. It's good for your plants, but it may not be helpful for your vegetables. Just check your plants frequently for whether they need water. Try to rule out other causes. Like I said, we had the wilting, but it was because of a nutrient issue. And then the mulch, as we talked about, 3 to 4 inches. Avoid over fertilizing. You put more nitrogen on your garden, you're going to get a lot of green leafy stuff, but you're not going to get much fruit. You
How often do you suggest it? Fertilize?
can No, twice during the summer, I would say. You'll want to do it in June and then you'll do it maybe in August. You don't need to do often.
Oh.
Again, a soil test will tell you if you need the nutrients or not. Sometimes everything's fine. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to add any fertilizer. Brewing the legumes, the beans, grow beans, that adds nutrients to the soil. So again, the control weeds, you prioritize landscape plant needs. We had someone that wrote to us last year and had established trees. They had pine trees. They had a prize row of pine trees by the driveway. And they asked if they needed to water them. And the answer is yes. There was an interesting article I found that said, drought plus pine trees equals trouble.
Equals what?
Trouble.
Um,
So it is, if you have a prize tree, dogwood or something in front of your house, do give it some water. Give it like a big bucket of water once a week, just to make sure it's getting enough nutrition from the water. Again, you can decrease the size of the vegetable garden and then consider replacing thirsty plants. If you notice the plant is requiring ever so much more water, if you're in a water drought, watering ban, then you want to use
rain barrels for vegetables.
if water is coming off the roof, it's picking up chemicals from the roofing. It also could be bird excrement and other things that go into that. And it would be unhealthy for your vegetable plants to put that into your vegetable garden. So you want to just use that for your watering of your flowers and trees and things like that. These are some of the resources I have here that I'd recommend. A lot of people recommend, one of the URI professors recommends this one, which I prefer this one only because this one also has some plant species recommendations that are non-native, which that I try to avoid. Doug Ptolemy's has a wealth of information. This was a handy thing that I found that gives a picture description and descriptions of all the bugs that are pests and all the ones that are good bugs too. I did a program for preschoolers at one of the libraries in Connecticut recently. Good bugs, bad bugs. So I mentioned the Learn at Home webinar series, videos that were created there. A lot of people are using them. Last year we had 33,000 views, so we know a lot of people are depending on those. And then go to Cooperative Extension if you have other resources you'd like to do the plant sale, native plant sale, or the plant sale is the 6th of May, the Saturday. I think it starts at 9 o'clock. You have to get there early to get there. We have this chicken cutter program, which is really pretty great. People send pictures of a tick that's on them to identify if it's harmful or not. And just so you know, if you take a picture, like you can put the tick in a bag, take a picture of the front and the back and send that in to them. They can also tell you how long it's been on you. And some people say, oh, I just got it today. But because of the size of how much it's increased in size, they can tell you, oh, it's been there for 4 days or it's been there for a week, And we do have some new ticks that are coming into the area that have different diseases than that are worse than Lyme disease. So it's good to know about that. We have other resources about drinking water. They do testing, talk about, they have a wastewater training program, and then stormwater solutions. And again, I've already mentioned about the soil pH testing, the free testing that we do. And then anytime you have a question, you can contact the hotline. The emails, people send in emails with pictures. And if you're sending pictures of disease things or something like that, we say close-ups as well as the whole plant itself. And this is how you can reach us. Any other questions?
What about fruit trees? Are there any good fruit trees that you plant in this area?
There are a lot. And University of Massachusetts has the last one that they planted or that they created is from last year. It's a fruit tree planting guide manual. It's like a huge document and it talks about all the different kinds of fruits, trees. There are other resources that we use, like Maine has one for home gardeners in terms of when to spray. It has a spraying schedule, what you spray and when you spray it. It's a very intensive kind of operation to grow fruit trees well.
I have a question. I was reading my vegetable patch. I noticed a lot of grubs. How do I get rid of them without using poison or whatever? I mean, is there a natural substance I could use?
It depends on how much of an infestation you have. We usually say if you have a 12 by 12 space and you have more than 10, that's a significant problem. If you have less than that, then it's not something to worry about.
I have a friend who swears by shallow bowls of stale beer.
That's good for slugs.
Oh, that's slugs, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but not for grubs. The grubs,
Well, I was thinking, I thought.
yeah, thought I would do.
Yeah,
I would just
exactly.
push them.
You know,
Yeah,
I thought there might be a better way.
yeah. No, some people put in grub X. You know,
But in a vegetable garden?
not in a vegetable garden. No, you know, I just kind of rake around and disturb the area and pull them out.
They have a natural predator.
Yeah,
Chickens.
skunks, skunks, possums. People see their turkeys will come in, but they mess up your yard. So
Yeah.
It's a nice and fence. Thank you.
yeah, you can use a. There are some organic ones, but they only affect the Japanese beetles. You could have the Asiatic beetles, the brown ones. And-
These are white grubs with kind of a
Yeah,
blackish head.
Yes, I have that too. I have
Yeah.
spots in my,
but it's not very much different between the Asiatic ones and the Japanese.
One more question. I also noticed, and it might be, I'm not sure if they're those jumping worms. It's a white, they're kind of thin. It almost looks like a vermicelli.
Mhm.
And there's something called the potworm.
I'm not sure of that name, but I know there is a jumping worm that is white.
Okay. I just didn't, I can't say that they moved all that fast because it was fairly chilly that day. But is that something is that just something you just have to pick out?
I wouldn't worry about unless you identify it and it's identified as invasive and something that's harmful. Because there are some worms that are different colors that are good, you know, and red wigglers, for example, will wiggle a lot too, but they're good. That's what they use in the vermin. Yeah. Yeah, the thing is about these Asian jumping worms is that they only last a season. They don't keep on, you know, they die when it gets too cold, but they lay lots of cocoons all over the place. And so right about now is when you start seeing them. They're really, really small, but very feisty. You can just take them and drop them in some soapy water. And some water with just like a little bit of just a couple drops of dish soap, and that will kill them. That'll keep them from creating more, 100,000s of more cocoons. You can tell what they leave behind looks like coffee grounds. They're much smaller than the other castings that you find.
They're much more at the surface
They are.
of the soil. So you dig just a little bit and the head comes up.
We just had a program on that too, this last week, and the video is there on invasive worms. You can use the dry mustard and mix it in with water and pour it over the area and they'll pop up. They don't like that. They'll surface, and that's where you identify how many you have and what kind of problem you have. But dry mustard mixed with water, yeah. But
Use mustard by any chance?
no, it doesn't have to be. Any other questions?
I have one. Can you speak about I think it's called wild mustard. It smells kind of.
Garlic wild mustard, yeah. It's very hard to.
Does that everywhere.
Yeah, you just have to keep on pulling it. And the problem is that if your neighbors have it, then you want to get it before it flowers and seeds. Because once it seeds, then you're going to have thousands of them. So you want to get them early on, recognize the leaves early on, and start pulling them then, and that will take care of them. You need to make sure you get the taproot. The other thing, that mugwort is another one that people see a lot of now. And that's spread by rhizomes to the roots, so you have to be really careful. You have to be really careful to get all the roots out.
You
So-
mentioned the goldenrod. Is that a rhizome type thing?
Mhm.
Because I
And
find
seed,
that
yep, both.
kinda is taken over, and I've been pulling it out. and-
Goldenrod's good. It's not it's not, you're not allergic to goldenrod. You're allergic to ragweed.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Because of it. But I thought, oh,
Just plant some purple asters, New England asters with it, and it'll be gorgeous. And you'll have a beautiful array at that time of year.
What would you spray in an area where you got your flowers and your mulch, but you got weeds coming up all over the place?
I just pull
Oh, a lot of weeds.
them. There's a lot of weeds, but
Yeah.
I put the extra mulch on and it's kept them down. But the ones that pop up, then there's fewer, and so I just go and keep weeding. It's relaxing. I just think, you get done and you've accomplished something, and you've accomplished something.
It's
Yeah.
therapy, right?
Yeah. The problem with herbicides is a lot of them are not specific enough, and they'll get on other plants and stuff like that. Part of the problem we have, some people will do that lawn, they do the lawn care spraying, and then if they do it on a day where it drifts, it can decimate your flower bed that's next to your neighbor's yard. So we get a lot of questions on that in terms of looking at things, and by looking at how the plant has senesced in terms of how it's died back, then we can kind of see, well, and then we start asking questions. Did your neighbors perchance spray herbicide? And it could be just drift that's come back in.
Is there a secret to get hydrangeas to turn purple?
It's adding acid.
Acid.
Yep, and you can do that through that near acid that you buy. So putting oak leaves around it, mulching with oak leaves, pine needles.
Do you cut the hydrangeas down in the winter?
Depends on what kind you have. I don't usually do it in the winter. I usually wait till the spring, and I can see which ones of the stems have died back and which ones are, because a lot of the hydrangeas will bloom on the second year, on the second year growth. So if there's leaves and coming up, but I have some what's called native hydrangeas that I just leave, and then they're just beautiful every year. They just keep on growing. I don't do a thing to them. So I would say it's best to wait and to make sure you have absolutely dead stalks. The other ones will come up and you'll see the dead stalks and trim them out then. And actually, leaving stalks in your garden is a good thing for pollinators that overwinter in that debris. A lot of people say, what do we do with the leaves? I just mulch my leaves. I just run the mulching mower over them and leave the leaves. It's good for the pollinators. And if you have other questions, call the hotline. Write your emails to the hotline. I work on the Friday team, and we're always there ready to help. Help yourself to any of the things here. If you didn't sign in, please do as you go out, just so we know you were here. If you want to look at any of the books, please do. Just kind of see what they're about.
A lot of those look familiar, so go ahead and take those pictures and write those titles and stuff in the library. Save your money for your treatments. Thank you so much, Alan. Thank you.
Very much.